The afternoon sun hung low in the sky, painting the Montana prairie in golden light that did nothing to warm Miriam Holt's bones. She stood in her dusty yard, clutching the handle of a water bucket, so tight her knuckles turned white. Little Ruth played nearby with her cornhusk doll, humming a tune Miriam had taught her. Caleb was out back chopping firewood, like the man of the house he tried so hard to be. A cloud of dust rose on the horizon. Miriam's heart dropped like a stone in a well. She knew that dust, knew the steady clop of those hooves. Sheriff Pike only rode out this way for one reason. Children. Her voice came out sharper than she meant. Ruth looked up, cornhusk doll forgotten in the dirt. Caleb appeared around the corner of their sagging barn, axe in hand. 3 horses came into view. Sheriff Pike in front, his star-shaped badge gleaming. 2 deputies behind him, faces like carved stone. Miriam set the bucket down slowly, wiping her hands on her apron, the one without holes. She forced her chin up as the sheriff reined in his horse. "Afternoon, Mrs. Holt." Pike tipped his hat, but his eyes stayed cold. "Afraid this isn't a social call." He pulled a paper from his saddlebag. The crisp rustle of it made Miriam's stomach twist. "County says you're behind on your taxes. 3 months now." The words hit like a slap. "But I paid what I could. Just last month half payments don't count." Pike's voice was flat. "Land's forfeit. And the children." He glanced at Caleb and Ruth, who had crept to their mother's side. "They'll need to come with us." Ruth's small hand fisted in Miriam's skirt. Caleb stood stiff beside her, but Miriam saw his lower lip tremble. "No." The word tore from her throat. "You can't. This is our home. Their father. Dead 2 winters now." Pike cut in. "And the law's clear. Can't have minors living on seized property." Miriam's knees threatened to buckle. She'd heard stories about the county orphanage. Children crammed like cattle, sickness running wild. Little ones who stopped smiling, stopped talking. "I'll get the money," she begged. "Give me 1 more month. I'll sell everything." Should have thought of that before. Pike swung down from his horse. "Now, let's not make this difficult." He reached for Ruth. What happened next came in flashes. Ruth's scream piercing the air. Caleb lunging forward, small fists flying. The deputy catching him by the collar like he was a stray pup. Miriam grabbing at Pike's arm, her fingers clutching at his sleeve. "Please." The word was a sob, raw and broken. "They're all I have left. Take the land, take everything, but not my babies." Pike shook her off like she was nothing. Miriam stumbled, falling to her knees in the dirt. The taste of dust filled her mouth as she watched the deputy toss Caleb onto a horse like a sack of grain. Ruth was crying so hard she could barely breathe, her tiny hands reaching for Miriam. "Ma, Ma." Miriam scrambled up, but Pike blocked her path. "Try anything foolish, and you'll be in jail before sundown," he warned. She stood frozen as they rode away, her children's cries fading into the distance. The bucket she'd been carrying lay on its side, water soaking uselessly into the dry earth. Only when the dust settled did Miriam realize she wasn't alone. A stranger sat astride a buckskin horse at the edge of her property. How long he'd been there, she couldn't say. His face was shadowed by his hat, but she could feel his eyes on her, on the tears cutting tracks through the dirt on her face. He didn't speak, didn't move, but in that moment, he was the only witness to a mother's broken heart, and somehow that mattered. The stranger didn't move at first. Miriam wiped her face with her sleeve, her breath still coming in ragged gasps. She didn't care who saw her like this, broken, desperate. What did pride matter now? The man nudged his horse forward, the animal's hooves crunching softly on the dry earth. As he drew closer, Miriam could see the sharp angles of his face, a jaw darkened by days without shaving, eyes that had seen too much. A faded scar ran along his cheekbone, pale against his sun-weathered skin. He stopped a few paces away and swung down from the saddle with the easy motion of a man who'd spent more time on horseback than on solid ground. Up close, he was taller than she'd thought, his frame lean but strong beneath his worn duster coat. For a long moment, He just looked at her. Then his gaze flicked toward the road, where the sheriff had disappeared with her children. "That ain't right," he said finally. His voice was low, rough like gravel, but not unkind. Miriam swallowed hard. "It doesn't matter what's right. It's the law." The stranger's mouth tightened. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a canteen, offering it to her. Miriam hesitated before taking it. The water was warm but clean, and she drank greedily, not realizing how parched she was until that moment. "You got family in town?" he asked. She shook her head. "No one." "Friends?" "Not anymore. Not since the drought had made everyone hard and suspicious. Not since her husband had died and left her alone to fight for scraps." The stranger studied her for another long moment, then nodded toward the house. "You gonna be all right here tonight?" Miriam almost laughed. All right, with her children gone and her heart shattered? But she knew what he meant. "I'll manage," she whispered. He tipped his hat slightly. "Name's Jonah Briggs." She didn't ask why he'd stopped. Didn't ask why he cared. Right now, she was too tired to question even this small kindness. "I'm Miriam Holt," she said quietly. Jonah glanced again toward the road, his expression unreadable. Then he reached into his saddlebag once more and pulled out a small, leather-bound book. A Bible. The edges were frayed, the cover cracked with age. He didn't open it, just held it for a moment before tucking it away again. "I'll be in town a few days," he said finally, "if you need anything." Miriam didn't know what to say. She just nodded. Jonah mounted his horse and turned toward the road. But before he rode off, he looked back at her one last time. "I'll see what I can do." Then he was gone, leaving Miriam standing alone in the yard, the weight of those words settling over her like the first faint hint of dawn after a long, dark night. The next morning, Miriam walked into town with her head held high, though her hands trembled at her sides. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ruth's tear-streaked face, heard Caleb's angry shouts as they dragged him away. The orphanage loomed at the edge of town, a square, gray building with barred windows. Miriam's stomach twisted as she approached, but she forced herself to keep moving. She had to see them, had to know they were all right. Before she could reach the door, a voice stopped her. "Mrs. Holt." She turned. Jonah Briggs stood near the general store, his hat pulled low. He stepped closer, his voice quiet. "They won't let you in." Miriam's breath caught. "I have to see them." Jonah shook his head. "Sheriff's orders. No visitors till the debt's paid." Her vision blurred. She clenched her fists to keep from screaming. Jonah hesitated, then spoke again. "I talked to some of the ranchers outside town. They need help with spring branding. Pays decent." Miriam blinked. "You're offering me work?" "Both of us," Jonah said. "I'll take half the pay. You take the other half. Put it toward your debt." She stared at him. "Why would you do that?" For the first time, something flickered in his eyes, something old and wounded. "Let's just say I've seen enough folks pushed down by men like Pike." Miriam swallowed hard. She didn't trust easily, not anymore. But what choice did she have? "All right," she whispered. Jonah nodded. "We start tomorrow at first light." As he turned to leave, Miriam called after him. "Mr. Briggs?" He paused. "Thank you." He didn't answer, just tipped his hat and walked away. But for the first time since they'd taken her children, Miriam felt something like hope. Meanwhile, across town, Sheriff Pike leaned against the bar in the saloon, his face grim. Silas Corbin, the richest cattleman in the territory, sat across from him, swirling a glass of whiskey. "Heard you had some trouble with that Holt woman." Pike scowled. "Nothing I couldn't handle." Corbin's smile didn't reach his eyes. "See that it stays handled. I want that land." Pike nodded, but his grip tightened on his glass, because he'd seen the way Jonah Briggs had looked at him yesterday, and he didn't like it one bit. The branding fires burned bright against the pre-dawn darkness when Miriam arrived at the Lazy J Ranch. She'd walked the 3 miles from town, her boots kicking up dust that clung to her damp hem. Jonah was already there, talking quietly with ranch foreman Tom Mercer near the corral. Miriam hesitated at the edge of the yard, The other ranch hands, all men, were giving her sideways looks. She straightened her shoulders and walked forward. Jonah turned as she approached. "Mrs. Holt." His nod was respectful. "Foreman Mercer's agreed to pay us $2 a day between us." Mercer spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "Long as you keep up. No slack for sentiment." His eyes flicked to Miriam's work-roughened hands. "You ever branded before?" "My husband taught me," she said. The memory of Jacob showing her how to handle a hot iron made her throat tighten. The work was brutal. The acrid smell of burning hair and flesh clung to her clothes. Her arms ached from wrestling terrified calves. The other hands stopped staring by midday, too busy sweating and swearing under their breath to care about a woman working beside them. At dusk, as Miriam rubbed her sore shoulders, Jonah appeared beside her with 2 tin plates of stew. They sat on an upturned crate behind the cookhouse. "You did good today," he said quietly. Miriam poked at her food. "I need to do better. Faster." She looked toward town where the orphanage windows glowed yellow in the gathering dark. "Do you think, could we see them soon? Just for a minute?" Jonah's jaw worked. "Pike's got eyes everywhere. Best wait till we have some money to show." He hesitated, but I asked around. "The matron's name is Mrs. Henderson. She's stern but fair. A small comfort." Miriam clung to it. As they ate, she noticed Jonah studying the ranch ledger Mercer had left on a nearby barrel. "Something wrong?" she asked. Jonah tapped the page. "These numbers don't add up. Mercer's paying us $2, but the county tax collector's getting $3 per head in brand fees." His eyes narrowed. "That's more than the law allows." Miriam's spoon froze halfway to her mouth. "You think?" "I think someone's lining their pockets," Jonah said grimly. A shadow moved near the barn. Miriam caught a glimpse of a man watching them before he melted into the darkness. One of Corbin's men, maybe. Her skin prickled. That night as she lay in the narrow bunkhouse Cot Mercer had grudgingly allowed her, Miriam stared at the ceiling. The pieces were starting to fit together. If the taxes were being inflated, if someone was stealing. She turned her face into the thin pillow, so no one would hear her crying. Somewhere in town, her children were doing the same. The next Sunday, their one day off, Jonah appeared at Miriam's homestead at first light. She was scrubbing her only good dress in a washtub, preparing for church. He held up a battered ledger. "Found this in Mercer's office last night." Miriam wiped her hands on her apron. "You stole it." "Borrowed." Jonah's expression was grim. "Look here." He pointed to columns of numbers. "Every ranch near Corbin's land is paying higher taxes. The ones farther away, normal rates." Miriam's breath caught. "He's targeting certain properties. Yours included." Jonah flipped pages. "And look at the dates. Your taxes tripled right after." "After Jacob died," Miriam finished softly. Her hand shook. "They thought a widow wouldn't fight back." A noise outside made them both turn. Jonah moved first, shoving the ledger under his coat, just as Sheriff Pike appeared in the doorway. "Morning, folks." Pike's smile didn't reach his eyes. His gaze swept the room, lingering on the washtub, the meager furnishings. "Heard you've been working hard, Mrs. Holt." Miriam forced herself to meet his eyes. "Doing my best, Sheriff." Pike nodded slowly. Then his attention shifted to Jonah. "Funny thing, Tom Mercer's missing a ledger. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you, Briggs?" Jonah's face gave nothing away. "Can't say I do." The silence stretched. Finally Pike tipped his hat. "Well, enjoy your Sunday." They watched from the window as he mounted up and rode toward town. Miriam exhaled shakily. "He knows." Jonah's hand went to the Bible in his saddlebag, a nervous habit she'd noticed. "We need more proof. Something that ties this directly to Corbin." That afternoon, while Jonah kept watch outside, Miriam searched through Jacob's old trunk. Receipts, bills of sale, a few precious letters. Then her fingers brushed against something wedged in the lining, a small notebook. Her breath caught as she flipped through the pages. Jacob's neat handwriting detailed every transaction with the county. And on the last page, dated just before his death, Corbin offered to buy the land again today. When I refused, he smiled and said, accidents happen. We'll move the cattle to North Pasture tonight. Miriam's vision blurred. That very night, their barn had mysteriously burned. She clutched the journal to her chest. This was it. Proof that Corbin had been trying to take their land for years, that he might have had a hand in Jacob's death. Outside, she heard Jonah's low whistle a warning. She barely had time to shove the journal into her bodice before the door burst open. Sheriff Pike stood there, his face dark with anger. Behind him, two of Corbin's ranch hands loomed. Thought you might be hiding something, Pike said. Empty your pockets. Miriam's heart hammered. The journal burned against her skin. If they found it, Jonah stepped between them, his voice dangerously calm. You got a warrant, Sheriff? Pike's hand hovered near his gun. Don't need one for troublemakers. For one terrible moment, the air crackled with tension. Then Jonah slowly raised his hands. All right, search me first. As Pike patted him down, Miriam's fingers crept to the hidden journal. She had to get this to someone who could help. But who in this town would stand against Corbin? Then she remembered the new preacher. Young, idealistic. A man of God who might listen. If she could just reach him. The first drops of rain began to fall as Jonah rode back from town that evening. The meeting with the preacher had gone better than expected. The young reverend had listened intently to their story, his expression growing graver by the minute. He'd promised to bring their evidence to the territorial judge, who would be visiting next Sunday. Jonah urged his horse faster. The storm was rolling in quick, and he wanted to reach Miriam's homestead before full dark. The sheriff's visit earlier had left him uneasy. Men like Pike didn't give up that easily. A movement in the trees ahead made him rein in sharply. His hand went to his rifle. Who's there? No answer. Just the wind rustling the branches. Jonah exhaled slowly. Probably just a deer. He nudged his horse forward. The shot cracked through the twilight. Pain exploded in his shoulder. Jonah barely had time to register the ambush before two riders burst from the trees. He grabbed for his rifle. A second shot kicked up dirt near his horse's hooves, spooking the animal. As his horse reared, Jonah lost his balance. He hit the ground hard, his injured shoulder taking the brunt of the impact. Through blurred vision, he saw boots approaching. Well now, a familiar voice. One of Corbin's men, the same one who'd been watching them at the ranch. Look what we found wandering where he don't belong. Jonah tried to push up, but a boot slammed into his ribs. He gasped. Rolling onto his back, his rain began pelting down. Should have kept riding, stranger, the man said, leveling a pistol at Jonah's face. This ain't your fight. Jonah's fingers scrabbled in the mud, searching for his dropped rifle. His vision swam. The cold rain mixed with warm blood, soaking his shirt. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was the flash of lightning illuminating three riders, not two, galloping away into the storm. Miriam paced the length of her small cabin, glancing out the window for the 10th time in as many minutes. Jonah should have been back by now. The storm had worsened, wind howling around the corners of the house like a living thing. A pounding at the door made her jump. She rushed to open it, expecting Jonah, but found the young preacher instead, his hat dripping, face pale. Mrs. Holt, he gasped. You need to come quick. It's Mr. Briggs. Miriam's heart stopped. What's happened? Ambushed. He's at the church alive, but... The preacher swallowed hard. They worked him over good. Miriam didn't wait for details. She grabbed her shawl and followed the preacher into the storm. The church basement was dim, lit by a single lantern. Jonah lay on a cot, his face ashen. Someone had cut away his bloodied shirt, revealing an ugly gunshot wound in his shoulder and dark bruises blooming across his ribs. Miriam fell to her knees beside him. Jonah, his eyelids fluttered. When he saw her, his cracked lips moved. Got the journal. She patted her bodice where the small book lay hidden. Safe. The preacher brought a basin of water and clean rags. As Miriam began cleaning Jonah's wounds, he told them what had happened between ragged breaths. 3 men, he whispered. Not just Corbin's, Pike was there. Miriam's hand stilled. The sheriff himself had been part of the ambush. That changed everything. The preacher's face hardened. This has gone too far. He stood abruptly. The judge arrives tomorrow. I'll take your evidence directly to him. Miriam hesitated. It's too dangerous. If Corbin finds out, then we don't tell anyone. The preacher's eyes burned with conviction. Not even my wife. The fewer who know, the safer we all are. Jonah tried to sit up, wincing. They'll be watching the roads. The preacher nodded. Which is why I won't take the roads. There's an old Indian trail through the mountains. I can reach the judge by dawn. Miriam looked from the preacher's determined face to Jonah's injuries. They were running out of options. All right, she said finally. She carefully extracted Jacob's journal and handed it to the preacher. God keep you safe. The preacher tucked the journal inside his Bible. I'll ride tonight. You two stay here. It's the last place they'll look. As the preacher disappeared into the storm, Miriam turned back to Jonah. His breathing had grown more labored, his skin hot to the touch. Fever was setting in. She dipped a fresh cloth in water and pressed it to his forehead. Jonah's hand weakly caught her wrist. Miriam. His voice was barely audible. If this goes wrong. Hush now. She smoothed his hair back. The children need you. I need you. Outside, lightning split the sky. Somewhere in the darkness, the preacher rode toward justice, or into another trap. Miriam picked up the preacher's abandoned Bible and began to read aloud from the Psalms, her voice steady despite the fear clutching her heart. The words wrapped around them like armor as the storm raged on. The church bell tolled as Miriam helped Jonah up the steps Sunday morning. His face was pale beneath the shadow of his hat brim, his injured arm bound tightly against his chest. Every movement clearly pained him, but he had insisted on coming. Easy now, she murmured, taking his good arm. The townspeople streaming into the church gave them curious looks, whispering behind their hands. News of the ambush had spread, though no one dared speak it aloud. Sheriff Pike stood by the doors, his smile sharp as a knife. Mrs. Holt, Briggs, didn't expect to see you here. His eyes lingered on Jonah's injuries. Jonah met his gaze evenly. Wouldn't miss it, Sheriff. Inside, the church was packed. Miriam spotted Silas Corbin in his usual front pew, his expensive suit out of place among the settlers' homespun clothes. The air smelled of beeswax and tension. Then the side door opened, and the territorial judge entered, a tall man with silver hair and piercing eyes. Behind him came the young preacher, his face carefully blank. When his gaze met Miriam's, he gave the slightest nod. The service began normally enough, hymns, prayers. But when the time came for the sermon, the preacher stepped forward with a Bible in one hand and Jacob's journal in the other. Brothers and sisters, he began, his voice carrying through the hushed church. Today we speak of justice. Corbin shifted in his seat. Pike edged toward the door, but two men Miriam didn't recognize blocked his path. The judge's men, she realized. The preacher held up the journal. This belongs to Miriam Holt. In it, her late husband recorded threats against his family, threats from a man who coveted his land. His gaze found Corbin, the same man who has been stealing from all of you. Murmurs rippled through the congregation. The judge stood. I've reviewed the evidence. Tax records show systematic fraud targeting specific homesteads. He fixed Pike with a stare, conducted with the sheriff's knowledge. Pike's hand twitched toward his gun, then froze as the judge's men drew their weapons. Chaos erupted. Corbin surged to his feet. This is slander. Prove it, the judge said calmly. He nodded to the preacher, who began reading Jacob's final entries aloud. The threats, the suspicious timing of the barn fire. Then Jonah stood, wincing as he moved forward. 2 nights ago, Sheriff Pike and Corbin's men ambushed me to keep this quiet. He gestured to his wounds, but the truth has a way of coming out. One by one, other settlers stood, ranchers who'd lost land, families who'd been cheated. The dam broke when old Mr. Peterson from the general store admitted Corbin had pressured him to overcharge certain customers. The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. Silas Corbin, Harlan Pike, you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. As the judge's men led them out, Miriam finally allowed herself to hope. She turned to Jonah, tears in her eyes. It's over. But he was looking toward the back of the church where Mrs. Henderson, the orphanage matron, stood with Caleb and Ruth. The children's faces lit up when they saw their mother. Not quite over, Jonah said softly. Not yet. The days that followed passed in a blur. With Corbin and Pike jailed, the judge worked swiftly to restore stolen properties. Miriam's taxes were recalculated properly, a sum she could actually pay with the wages she and Jonah had earned. But when the judge offered to let her reclaim her homestead immediately, Miriam hesitated. I need to see my children first. The orphanage matron, Mrs. Henderson, turned out to be kinder than Miriam had feared. She kept Caleb and Ruth clean and fed, though Ruth clung to Miriam's neck and refused to let go for a full hour after their reunion. You came back, Caleb whispered, trying to sound grown-up though his voice cracked. Miriam kissed his forehead. Always. Jonah stood awkwardly to the side during the reunion. Miriam noticed how Caleb watched him with wary curiosity. That evening, as Miriam tucked Ruth into bed back at their homestead, the judge having returned it to her immediately, she found Jonah packing his saddlebags by the fire. You're leaving, she said, her heart sinking. Jonah paused. Figured you'd want your home to yourself now. He avoided her eyes. I'll head north in the morning. Miriam studied his profile in the firelight, the stubborn set of his jaw, the scar on his cheek, the way his fingers lingered on his mother's Bible before tucking it away. A floorboard creaked. Caleb stood in the bedroom doorway, his bare feet silent on the wood. You really shot it out with Corbin's men. Jonah shook his head. Got ambushed, more like. Caleb chewed his lip. Ma says you helped save our farm. Your ma did most of the saving. The boy considered this, then nodded toward the door. Barn roof's leaking. If you stayed, maybe you could help me fix it. Jonah's hand stilled on his saddlebag. He looked at Miriam, uncertainty in his eyes. Miriam smiled softly. We could use the help, if you're willing. For a long moment, the only sound was the crackling fire. Then Jonah slowly unbuckled his saddlebag and set it aside. Reckon I could stay a while, he said quietly. And when Caleb grinned, the first real smile Miriam had seen from him since this ordeal began, she knew this was where Jonah was meant to be all along. Spring came gently to the Holt homestead. The first green shoots pushed through the thawing earth, and the creek by the property swelled with snowmelt. Miriam stood by the window, watching as Jonah and Caleb worked on the new fence line, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Ruth played nearby with her cornhusk doll, humming the same tune Miriam had taught her months before. It had been 3 weeks since the judge's ruling. 3 weeks since Silas Corbin and Sheriff Pike had been led away in chains. 3 weeks since Jonah had decided to stay. Miriam turned the bacon in the skillet, the rich smell filling the small cabin. She glanced at the shelf where Jonah's mother's Bible now sat beside her own, both well-worn from nightly readings. The door creaked open, and Jonah stepped inside, wiping his boots on the mat. Fence is holding, he announced. Those calves won't be going anywhere. Caleb bounded in after him, his cheeks pink from the cool morning air. Jonah let me hammer in the last post all by myself. Miriam ruffled his hair. I'm proud of you. Ruth abandoned her doll and tugged at Jonah's sleeve. Will you read to us tonight? Jonah's eyes met Miriam's, and something warm passed between them. I reckon I could do that, he said softly. After supper, as the last light of day faded, they gathered by the fireplace. Jonah opened the Bible to the Psalms, his rough fingers careful on the thin pages. The Lord is my shepherd, he read, his voice steady and sure. I shall not want. He mocketh me to lie down in green pastures. Miriam closed her eyes, letting the words wash over her. She thought of the long, hard winter, of fear and loss, of prayers whispered in the dark. And now here they were, together, safe. When Jonah finished, Ruth was asleep against his shoulder, and Caleb's eyelids were drooping. Miriam carried them to bed, tucking them in with kisses. When she returned, Jonah was standing by the window, looking out at the moonlit fields. She came to stand beside him, their shoulders brushing. "You're happy here?" she asked quietly. Jonah didn't answer right away. Then he turned to her, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "I didn't know I could be this happy," he admitted. Outside, the first crickets of spring began their evening song. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. The homestead, once so lonely and quiet, was alive with peace. Miriam reached for Jonah's hand, threading her fingers through his. "Welcome home," she whispered, and as the fire crackled and the night deepened around them, it truly felt like home for them all. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this heartwarming story of faith, courage, and new beginnings, please like and subscribe for more inspiring tales. Let us know in the comments, what was your favorite moment?